Next slide.
Or can I control it from here or no? All right, so the goal today, we're going to go through and at a very macro level, look at different trends, opportunities, risks. Of course, we want to understand our future financial obligations. If there are things in there that we know that we've already committed to, those, again, they're known facts. We want to, and this is a little bit different than in the past, but it's a theme that's emerging between the different municipalities across New Brunswick. I'm working with UMMB or so on as part of the local government fiscal reform. And when we're having just general conversations, this is something that all municipalities have a focus on now. It's to understand the future impacts and the affordability on taxpayers. Next slide, please. Again, it'll provide some different financial options and strategies based on the findings. And we're going to do some sensitivity analysis as well on assessment and property tax revenues. And really what we're here today is to provide information to council and then seek feedback before we really enter the budget process. The kickoff for the corporate budget process is September 1st. We're already working on it in the finance area. So that's really what we're here for today. So next slide, please. So we're going to go through our current situation. You'll see that the city, like we're in a stable financial position, but there are challenges that exist. We're going to touch on affordability and housing, capital budget pressures, and operating budget pressures. So really today, those are the four areas we're going to touch. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So our current situation. So we're going to go through some key indicators, and we're really going to talk about assessment in this area. Next slide, please. So in terms of our assessment, as you can see, historically, it's really, we have a lot of ups and downs. We have some major growth years. We have some years where it becomes a little bit more tougher, challenging, and so on. So it's really cyclical. Our job is to ensure that we can maintain a balance within those different high years and low years. One thing I want to point out, and it's really it's key information for this, is last year we had a 12.2% overall assessment increase. So that's our assessment base for our municipality. In there, that represented 3% was due to new construction and growth, and then changes to existing. So that's our current assessment base was 9.2%. What that tells us is a lot of it had to do with rising assessment and especially rising home property assessments. That's really where 9.2% came in. Next slide, please. Overall, our property taxes represent 87% of our revenues. The other 13% we could have, for example, we would have our Kodiak Transpo revenues, our Coliseum. We get some provincial transfers because we provide services to LSD or so on. But we are really dependent on one source of revenue, 87%. For New Brunswick, in the past, and this is something that we are discussing as part of the local government's fiscal reform or so on, properties in New Brunswick are around 70% reliable on property tax revenues, 30% reliable on other sources of revenues. Now in the province, it's 85%. What that means that when local governments are challenged, there's one contributor that's really going to that has to make up that shortfall in revenues. Really positive for our city is we have 68% of our assessment base is residential and 32% is non-residential. That is really positive for our city. We're really fortunate. In New Brunswick, we probably have the best mix of residential to non-residential. I believed in the Finn report, they were mentioning that for a local government, you should be around that 70-30 or even 60-40 to get that balanced approach. So we're really in a positive situation there. Next slide, please. This is just to show that what we've done with our tax rate over the past few years. You could see from 2015 to 2021, again, we would receive assessment increases of 2, 3, 4%, pretty stable. The tax rate would stay at a stable rate, and we would get some, let's call it modest assessment increases and property tax increases. And then after that, we would be able to, to do pretty much status quo, plus add a few new services or increased services. And that's how we budgeted. Over the past few years, we've seen, since the pandemic, we've seen a rise in assessment values. And to counter that, council has reduced the tax rate to be able to ensure that our property tax owners are able to pay their property tax bills, but also to increase the service levels in areas that where there was pressure. Next slide, please. This is a breakdown of our expenses. This is important because what this really means is that the majority of our expenses are fixed or semi-fixed. So that means that when council makes a decision, they are a long-term decision. We cannot pivot as fast as others. In here, we have, for example, we have collective agreements, we have contracts and things like that. So once we make a decision, they are more long-term than you would see in private industry. Next slide, please. Our debt ratio. So our debt ratio, that represents the debt ratio is the amounts of fiscal payments that we pay in 1 year in comparison to our total budget. So for the city of Moncton, for our general fund, we're around that 9 to 10%, which is really positive. In the province, there's a maximum that you have to be. It's 20%. If you go above 20%, then you become, let's call it, a special child of the province, and they will monitor your capital decisions and so on. For now, we are in a very stable position. Even if you look at the trends, even with the new police facility and so on, we are still maintaining a good level of debt ratio. So that really means that we are in a stable position. And what is really good about having this debt ratio stable, it provides flexibility to the municipality to be able to address other priorities, because your new investments are not all invested in debt payments. Next slide, please. In terms of asset management, we just show, this slide is just to prepare. This one would not necessarily be seen as positive as others, but there's a reason for this. So in 2023, that would be your red line. That was our infrastructure deficit last year. This year, as you can see, our infrastructure deficit has increased. The one major reason for that is the replacement values of our assets, because of inflation and so on, has increased again. It increases even more than a traditional CPI because, for example, our bucket of goods is not the same as you would see in a CPI index. Ours is more construction materials, pavement, fuel, and so on. So that would be the reason. We are still in a positive, in an okay position. No local government will ever be okay and not have an infrastructure deficit. Really, the goal for us is to ensure that it's controllable, we understand where the pressures are, and that we implement strategies that would address this. We are also very comparable. We just did an exercise with the other municipalities in New Brunswick, and we are very comparable to all the other municipalities of our size and in terms of scalability as well. Next slide, please. In terms of how we've addressed these growth pressures or so on, in the past 4 budget cycles, we've added 74.5 employees. So that's what we've added. We've also sorted them out in terms of service area, where we have added. In operations, you can see the major growth, the 11.5, 10 of those had to do with the increased snow clearing services that year. In sustainable growth and development, we added positions in planning, building, and inspection to address the growth pressures. Protective services, most of them, there's I believe three or four positions that are linked to fire, and the rest would be the municipal staff that work for the CRPA. So, and in this employee growth graph over the past 4 years, it would not include the additional RCMP officers that were added to the budget. It would also not include the additional CSO, our commissionaires that provide public safety because those are contracts that we have. Next slide, please. Now, we're going to go into this section of affordability in housing. We're going to touch base on the spike protection mechanism and what it means to our community. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the housing demand shortfalls and the challenges that we face as a city. Next slide, please. So one of the things that impacts affordability in housing is inflation and interest rates. They both do it. So for example, there was a lot of individuals, if you read through different economic articles or so on, had renewed their mortgages in 2019, 2020, 21, right? Renewed for 3-5 years or so on. What's happening now is once they renewed at rates of 2%, 1.8% or so on, now when it's time to renew because their contract has extended, with the newer interest rates, it creates a hit to our individuals. It's also, as per the presentation that was made by the Greater Moncton Chamber of Commerce, there's also, it also impacts the business cases for affordable housing and also rental units. Very important to note that it's all kind of linked. The things that we're going to talk about in this section, they impact the taxpayer the same as the developers. Next slide, please. So what has the city done as of now? We've actually done a lot, and we should take credit for it. We've invested $6 million in Rising Tides. The creation of the Downtown Community Incentive Grant has really helped. If you look at the development that has occurred in the downtown, when speaking to developers, this is a tool that really works. It impacts the monies that we have to address growth pressures in the short term, but in the long term, it's really paying off dividends. Where our teams are also administering various grants programs. And of course, council has reduced the tax rate to lessen the impact of rising assessment. That impacts our taxpayers, our residential owners, but also our developers. And that goes a long way. Next slide, please. So we're now going to speak about the spike protection mechanism and what it is. So that's a Government of New Brunswick program that's in place for eligible owner-occupied residential properties. So that is the property that you own and that you live in. It's only good for one property as of now. The program is supposed to expand in 2025 to cover other types of properties, but as of now, it's only our residential property owners that own one home. That's the one that is protected. If they own a second home, that second home is not protected by this program. The way it works is your assessment increases for tax purposes, not your real assessment. It's capped at 10% per year. And again, it includes properties with new construction, major improvements, and the ones that have recently been sold. Although the ones that have recently been sold are assessed at a high value because they are at the market value, which is traditionally a little bit higher than our assessment base. Next slide, please.
So they're excluded. Those properties are excluded.
They're excluded in the year that it sells.
Yes.
But in the following year, if the assessment is more than 10%, they are protected.
I see. Okay.
Right? It's good for the year where you buy. Yeah. So what we've done here is we've tried to, we've taken the data we've received from Assessment New Brunswick to try and get a sense of how many properties within the city are in the spike protection mechanism right now. The reason we're doing that is we want to see if we do not do anything to the tax rate, how many properties would see a 10% increase on their property tax bill? So what we've done is we've gone through the data, we've pulled the number of properties, and we don't have access to all the data, but it's still pretty good. We bill 21,100 units. So we currently have around 86% of our properties that are currently in the spike protection mechanism. This number is the same throughout the province. So that's why when we're having conversations, this same topic keeps coming up. We've also provided a distribution of where they fall within the spike protection mechanism. So we have 30% of those properties that are in the spike protection mechanism are currently assessed at under 250,000. We have another 32% between 250,000 to 350,000. And then 13% for 350,000 to 449,000, and over 450,000, we have around 10%. So that's how we make up. We broke that up. Next slide, please. So next slide. I believe that was the previous one. Oh, perfect. Thank you. So what we've modeled out, just for, again, for sensitivity analysis, let's say that we would want to maintain the tax rate, and that's the policy that we would set. We took 3 different types of development. So I'll walk you through the first one. So the first one is a property, and we've also vetted this data, like this is data that exists within the data that we've received. It's actual data. So the first example, what we're looking at is a property that is assessed at 300,000 as per Assessment New Brunswick, currently right now. But for tax purposes, because of the spike protection mechanism, that property is only taxed on 250,000. That property in 2024 has a property tax bill of 3,558. If we do nothing and we maintain that tax rate, next year we get a 10% increase. We get a 10% increase on that property tax, which would bring it to 3,914. In 2029, that property would pay 5,730, and in 2034 would pay close to 8,500. That's a property assessed at 250,000 right now for tax purposes. It's really good to reflect back, even when I presented this to my team. Okay, where is your property? Where do you fall, or so on? Because this is information we can relate to. If we take the next slide, it would be similar. So, not next slide. Thank you. A property at 350,000 for tax purposes, again with $100 million gaps because of the spike protection mechanism, again would pay 10% more next year. 2029, $8,000 per year in property taxes. In 2024, almost 11,000. And we prepared the same scenario. Now, when we look at this in terms of 10% and why it's important, we talk about the rates for NB Power and how those, they've proposed an increase of 9% and how it impacts individuals or so on. Now, we have to understand that the offering of a municipality is a lot more than simply just electricity and power, but the average NB Power bill in a year is 2,140. That's what I was able to pull that as per Statistics Canada. So a 9% on 2,140 and a 10% on the current property tax bills that we see in our community, the impact, there is an impact to our residential owners. Next slide, please. We've also pulled some information, and this is, we've worked a little bit with the Greater Moncton Chamber of Commerce. Now, what is important with this slide is that for not for apartment buildings, they have a municipal tax rate and they also have to pay a provincial tax rate. Our municipal tax rate is 60% of this total, and the provincial tax rate is around 40% of this total. The challenge with developments or so on, and we've actually pulled some data to confirm what the Chamber of Commerce was saying, is that the newer stock, and here we're talking about stock that is fully assessed. It's not the cranes that we see now. It would be more like some properties that are 3, 4, 5-year-olds, fully occupied or so on. The per door that they are being assessed and taxed is extremely high. Versus the older stock that is, let's call it more 15 to 20-year-old, the assessment has not caught up right now. So they're probably under-assessed, and the newer stock, they are assessed at the actual construction value plus some inflation. The per door cost, when we look at it per year of just simple provincial and municipal property taxes, we account for 60% again. For some of these can be as high as 4,870. For the older stock, they do have an advantage. In our research, the highest was 1,723. Why is that important? For two reasons. One is the commercial viability of these projects can be difficult, because just here you're talking about $450 per month per door just in property taxes, does not include hydro, does not include your mortgage payments plus profits. So that creates a challenge. So this is something when we talk about housing or so on, we can't solve it all because there are other economic factors built into it. But when we talk about affordable housing and being able to offer properties at $800 per month, $900 per month, $1,000 per month, if they are paying $450 just in property taxes, the business case becomes very difficult. Next slide, please. This data, it's the same thing, just we just transferred it over in terms of a monthly average. So as you can see, it can go up to 406. And in the older stock, they do have an advantage currently, but they are probably almost fully occupied as well because they can offer some advantageous rates. So next slide, please. In terms of capital budget pressures, and the one thing we're going to talk about capital budget or operating budget pressures, this will be there every year because as local governments, we are tasked with a finite amount of revenues that our taxpayers, that our community can afford, and we try to provide the best services and the most services for that pot of money. In terms of capital, there are some city priorities that are unfunded right now in the 5-year capital plan. That is the same every year. Inflation is high, especially when you look at it from a municipal perspective. Interest rates are high as well, so if we have to bond more, we will be paying more. Again, we always have to maintain our existing assets. There was a slide previously talking about infrastructure deficit. And as a booming city like Moncton, we have to address our growth and we want to attack our priorities. Next slide, please. So this is just something that the engineering department prepared. Again, pavements, resurfacing or so on, those are the ones that have heavily been impacted since the pandemic. But this is a challenge that we face. So we took the same project in 2019 and we applied it to 2024 based on the current values that we received. And for street resurfacing number 3, the inflationary increase is 80%. So from 2019 to 2024, we took another one, street resurfacing number 2, and that one was 100%. So that's a challenge. That is difficult to address. There's different components that goes into there. There's traditional inflation that impacts us. There are other things as well, though. When there are programs, for example, where a provincial or a federal government would have major infrastructure programs, there's still only a defined number of companies that can offer the services, especially in a place like New Brunswick. Last week, when we were meeting with the province, in northern New Brunswick, it's even worse than this because they even have less competition. They're seeing prices that are actually per unit higher than ours. So, but that's a challenge. Next slide, please. We've just listed off some competing priorities, and we are lucky to have these priorities. We are lucky that we're going to be able to address most of these priorities. Some of them we might have to delay a little bit, but we've just talked about Kodiak Transpo growth. I mean, in 2019, before the pandemic, if you would have looked at this, I don't think that would have been on this list. North End traffic study, our infrastructure growth. Again, we are a growing city. We're going to have to invest to be able to maintain that development. We talk about some master planning. There are many. There's the riverfront recreation. There's the fire master plan coming up. Next slide, please. We talk about some investments in our assets. On this slide, there operations center and warm storage, city hall, fleet electrification. There's been a study done on, or in the midst of being done on satellite locations for our library. We talk about additional new aquatic facilities, our vision lands. That's going to be great for our community. We're going to be able to put to have a lot of development there, but there's going to be also some infrastructure costs to be able to service that area. Next slide, please. And in terms of the operating budget pressures, it's going to be almost a similar conversations. Inflation does impact us. Interest rates does as well, because in the past, when we borrowed on $1 million, it costed us about 1.2 million, including interest over 5 years. Now that number has gone up just based on interest rates. And of course, our growth pressures. Next slide, please. A lot of the items that we mentioned here are similar to your capital. There are some that are even that weren't on, but for example, we've got to support existing operations. A lot of them I named a while ago. In terms of the environment, there's some operating pressures there. Next slide, please. The master plans, we talked about the additional aquatic facilities. Also other things in terms of what we do, snow operations, maintaining parks, splash pads, all of those things also are competing priorities that we try and balance during the budget process. Next slide, please. So our recommendations, and really our recommendations right now, they are purely administrative. The reason we're here today is really, we want your feedback. We really want to know, are we on the right track? If we're not, because in terms of the recommendations to create a budget, that is council policy. That is council's mandate. That is council's policy. And whatever direction that council provides us, that is what we will be working on for the next month and a half to be able to present to you during budget deliberations in early November. What we're proposing is a balanced approach where we would use 5.5% of property tax revenue growth for 2025 until the strategic plan is costed out. We would like to address the inflationary and growth pressures in capital. We would like to increase that capital budget by $3 million per year. We, of course, every year we need to look at our budgets and we need to adjust based on inflation to meet our current service levels. The positive for our city now is there are certain basket of goods that we have as a municipality where the inflation is not as big as it was previously. So we'll have to take that into consideration. Next slide, please. One of the things that we will need to do to be able to, again, it's not about cutting costs or so on, but to create more capacity to be able to deliver more services, we're going to need to focus on continuous improvement. Are there opportunities where we can do something with or more with the same resources. Sometimes it's just introducing new technology. Sometimes it's looking at a process and changing it, or so on. Again, we talked about it will be important. We had a session this morning on the strategic plan and where we're going. Eventually, costing out that strategic plan will be positive. It doesn't necessarily need to be costed out in perfection at 100%, but something where council agrees and directs administration to implement something that is understood and costed out. We need to continue advocacy to province. Again, when I talk to my counterparts from New Brunswick, we're probably the most fortunate. If you look at most municipalities in this province, we're lucky. Some can't even think about growth priorities or things like that. Some can't even balance a budget. But that being said, all the responsibilities that are now on a municipality, we need to ensure we have the proper funding to meet those. So that's really important. Next slide, next slide, please. If we invest $3 million per year, and again, investing in $3 million per year does not necessarily mean that you're investing when the asset is at the end of its useful life. Sometimes it can be doing some microsurfacing on pavement or something like that, where you will generate more. You patch or things like that. Just by doing that, this is how it impacts our infrastructure deficit. Now, again, it's not proportional though. If we say we would invest 10 million in just our existing assets, this will certainly go down, but you will never eliminate our infrastructure deficit. But that's just a slide, and if we go with that. Next slide, please. Now, this guaranteed that we were going to get this question. So if we recommend 5.5% of property tax revenue increases, what does that mean for the city of Moncton? What does that mean for 2025? That means that the assessment increase of 10%, we're almost guaranteed to have it. Because we have 85% of our properties, they are going to see a 10% increase, guaranteed. The new construction or things that sell during that year, it will be more than that. So we will get a 10% for sure. If we get more than 10%, all the better. Now, if we do receive 10% and we go with a 5.5% property tax revenue increase, that means in addition to the $1 million per year of council contingency that we continue adding to the budget, that means we would have $4.5 million to address level 2s, level 3s, the capital, although the capital really won't hit us too much this year because we would bond the majority of that would hit us next year. That's what it means. If we went with 5%, that would mean it would give us $4 million in addition to the $1 million of council contingency. If council would decide to go with a 6%, that would provide us $5.8 million in addition to the council contingency as well. Next slide, please. Now, what we've prepared is the top of the graph is if we maintain the property tax rate at its current level. We're looking at, and we're taking a $250,000 property, and again, that was around 30% of our properties in the city would fall somewhere near this bucket. If we maintain the tax rate, they would pay $356 more next year in property taxes. In 2029, they would pay $2,172 more than their 2024 property tax bill. And in 2034, they would pay $4,934 more. The reason for that is that every year it's a 10% increase. There's the rule that if that maintains, and it would maintain for years, your property tax doubles every 7 years. That's how that works. Now, if we would go with a 5.5% overall property tax reduction, it increased per year. If we would go with that for modeling purposes, next year, somebody with a $250,000 assessment home would see an increase of $195. In 2029, it would be an increase of 1,448, and 2034 of 3,037. Next slide, please. So we've done the same thing for the $350,000 value. And again, you can see that the property tax mitigation strategy, it does have an impact, but even at 5.5%, you're still looking, because of the compounding effect. Even if we introduce something like that, the average increase per year is 6.4% because it compounds year over year. So we've done that scenario for 350,000. And next slide. And we've done the same thing for $450,000. As you can see, just as an example, for a $450,000 home could pay up to $13,344 if strategies aren't put in place in 2034. So again, it's for everyone to see, okay, where do I fit into this? How does it impact us, or so on? And are there opportunities to be able to mitigate? Next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe based on that, but ballpark estimate. No, you probably have to go.
Can we go to the previous slide, please?
So taking the $450,000 value in 2024, but based on your calculations over the next 10 years, they would be paying 60, well, no more than that, but a total of maybe 50,000 in property taxes over the next 10 years, ballpark.
Yeah.
And their value of the house would go from 450 to what?
I would say based on the data, so that 450,000 that is currently assessed at 550,000. The assessment last year was still significant. That home went up by 8% or so on year one. Eventually that'll flatline once it hits, once it's going to hit the actual value that homes are selling at, because when people will appeal that after, they will win. I would say probably at that time, 620,000.
Right. So over the next 10 years, if I don't own 450,000, but if we take 250,000, whatever the average, they would spend how many dollars in property taxes? And over 10 years, their value would increase by how many dollars? I'm trying to get a formula that says basically on average $500 a year more, but your property value goes up by $20,000 a year more. So it's a heck of a great investment. If the return pays off in 10 years, you can't get RSPs or any other investment to give you that return on investment, right?
No, absolutely. And,
Okay.
And that's certainly, that is something, absolutely. Our properties, they are gaining values in terms of assessment. Where I do receive calls, I'm sure you receive calls as well. Is
too fast.
Too fast, and it's the individual that are on fixed income or have not done anything to their properties, and their assessment keeps going. They can't sell because they'll never be able to buy something else after, right? So anyways, but no, that's a fair question.
Okay.
Next slide, please.
But it'd be nice to have that information when you come to the public presentation saying small consolation, but for every $500 a year more or $200 a year more, you get this. It means this amount of value if you could sell it.
That's right.
Okay.
And I think here is, it may be a little bit, it'll give you a component of it. So this would be the total property taxes for different categories that we've modeled out today that you would pay over 10 years. And if we included the tax rate mitigation at 5.5%, that would be your savings over 10 years that it would provide. Next slide, please. And this is a statistics that that is becoming a little bit more frequent that we are starting to use. It's one that is, we often compare different property tax rates across the province or things like that. But for example, Bathurst has a really high property tax rate, but the assessed value of the homes are lower than in Moncton. So the overall property tax bill is still very, very similar. So this is a number through the province we started using more. It's the median after-tax income of your community and what you would be paying on, and we've modeled it out on a $250,000 home. So median, I'll kind of explain median, what that means. It's not the average. In this case, we did not want to use the average because there would be some really high income earners within our community that would skew the numbers, right? We can't have you can't have negative income, but you can have extremely high income, right? So we use the median. The median means it's the middle of the pack. So that would mean that there's 50% that it's less, that make less than this, and 50% that make more. So in Moncton, as per Stats Canada 2022, the median after-tax income for a family was $79,570. The property taxes on the assessed value of $250,000, we're paying around 4.2%. I just saw a presentation. We are right in the same ballpark as Fredericton right now in terms of that number. If we do not have a property tax mitigation strategy in place, and that's okay if that's a policy decision, these properties in 10 years would pay, and we've used an increase of income of 3% per year. That's normally what we're seeing in terms of increases of income. They currently pay 4% of their after-tax income to property taxes. You can see how it would go up to 8.1% in 10 years. If we introduce a property tax mitigation at 5.5%, still going to increase to 6.3%, but it is less than that 8.1%. For the households that are way lower than 79,000, of course, this number is more. So if you as council hear that, that is possible. And for the incomes that earn more, it would of course be less than that as well. Next slide, please. So that is really what we prepared today. We just wanted to approach it from a different component of what we hear, what we're seeing out there. And really it's about getting that feedback from council today in preparation for our budgeting exercise, to see where you're comfortable at, if you have any other information you need, even in preparation of making that decision. So, on va laisser ouvert les questions.
So my question is that I always get in my ward is that, you know, the high taxes, what do we see for it? You know, these are the things that people are starting to ask, like, you know, I think we forget the housing prices are going up, and it's a good investment to have a home. But at the same time, we don't see, like when we talk about a recreation master plan, you know, people are in different wards, not just mine, I'm sure it's another ward as well too, are asking, say, okay, so where's our money go? We're a bunch of new families, we're leaving people at the bus stops, there's not enough buses, there's no recreation here or there for our children. So there's, you know, we have to, you know, it's great to drop the taxes, and I agree with dropping the tax rate, but we also have to find that happy medium where people can also see that they're getting something for this high cost.
Yeah, no, that's a good, it's certainly, that's the balance of it. And when we as administration looked at this, if we would have been really, okay, not wanting to invest in those services or so on, we probably could have proposed a 2 to 3% and still make our city work based on existing service levels. That's where we looked at 5.5%, which gives $1 million of contingency plus 4.9 million to be able to invest in other initiatives as a fair balance. That 4.9 million plus the 1 million contingency, if you remove last year where we kept the rate pretty stable, that's more money than we've ever had in any other year, to put it in context for council.
Yeah, fair enough.
Go ahead, Councillor Legier.
Yeah, thanks. It's more money, but our expenses are higher. Right?
Well,
Like we had-
that's more money though that is available after we've adjusted for inflation in our projections already. So we have in here, for example, the 400,000 increase in patching that we saw as per contract values, the increased cost of snow clearing or so on. Like these are for the new services or so on. These new services do cost more though, but we've already captured, this would not be a base budget. We've already increased our categories to cover the inflation that we see across all of our components that is part of our current service levels.
So if I could, I don't know if you can bring the presentation back up. I had a couple of questions, but I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, sure.
When you were doing it. I don't know if the person, they're still there. So I don't know. It's I think it's slide 21 or slide 20, page 21, I think it is. I just wanted some, there we go. Yeah, I just wanted to get some clarity though, because if annual property tax, for example, this one, non-owner occupied multi-unit, but so how can it, so just maybe run through a 61 unit newer build.
Yep.
Has $4,800 tax, whereas a 32 has a little less than the 61 units. And how did you figure that out? And the 80 unit is only 3,500. I'm just trying to understand how the calculation was done. I would have thought the more units you had, the higher the property tax. But then and so it's not, it probably is, but it's not proportional?
So it would actually be the inverse. So normally, the more units you're going to have, the less your per door is going to be in terms of property taxes. Because you have, here we're calculating it per door. So what we've done here actually is, like, we don't play a role in here except to set the property tax rate for our municipality. So we've actually we've taken 10 different apartment buildings across the city in various wards or so on, and we actually pull the actual property tax bill that they pay. We then divide it by the number of units per those areas, and that's how we get to per door. The overall property tax bill, this is a per door. The overall property tax bill of this 118 unit, I guarantee you it's a lot more than the 32 unit, but they divide it over that many more doors, right? So that's how, and this is the actual property tax bill, like the actual thing they've paid, you submit that transaction or so on.
Sure. So every year was, so, you know, we put the $1 million contingency, I think, which has been good because there's a lot of things that we were perhaps not expecting that came our way. And I'm just wondering, and I understand the mitigation and so, and the pressure. I think it's difficult sometimes to, you know, to see your house go up in value, but you're not ready to sell it. So it's really just on paper. But your taxes and everything else are going up and you're having affordability issues. But we also, as a city, if I look at it from a, you know, from being on the board, is the city has fiscal pressures too. And so I think what Councillor Butler just mentioned is, I'm wondering, first of all, it would be probably a good idea at some point for us to do maybe a report card on the things that we do. I think one of the things that we often hear is people don't know necessarily all the things we're doing and where the money's being invested. And the other thing that I'd like you to look at maybe is that, you know, for every cent of tax mitigation represents $1 million. So approximately. So if we wanted to, for example, build another aquatic facility, well, if we earmarked a cent for that aquatic facility, then we could bond that and we could make it happen. Same as we have other challenges, be it in public safety and so on. And I don't know, I just would like to sort of have that conversation that would say, you know, and it doesn't mean that, for example, if we put a dollar, let's say a cent aside for the aquatic facility, and let's say there was a partnership or we build it, self-loan, whatever. If it's a $4 million build, Well, after 4 years, maybe that's a cent reduction that is done because we fulfilled what we wanted to do with the cent. In other words, I'd like to have that conversation than just simply sort of giving it back, and then we sit here often and we figure out how are we going to get the money for these things. So I think a conversation would be good when you think about it, because there are a lot of, for example, active transportation. You know, we have limited budgets, but we know the pressures that and what people want, what citizens want. So $1 million a year would go a long way to doing a lot with active transportation. And maybe that's the right thing, and maybe we report on it. We can always come back and say, you know what, this isn't working. We're going to remove a cent. But have that type of conversation, because I think until we do, it's always going to be that we're continually asked to do more with a lot less. But on the other hand, people are saying, you know, we want the city to grow. Newcomers want more amenities. They you know, we see them in the parks all the time. But, you know, how can we do that? So anyway, I just sort of put that out as food for thought when we're budgeting. And it only may be a few cents, but like each cent's $1 million. And it may get us to that end a lot faster, and then we can pull back. So just
And no, that's good, and that is the policy decision of council. The one thing, just through the research and preparing this, like we spend a lot of time or so on. And you know how they always say, well, in the Atlantic provinces, we're always 10 years behind the rest of Canada. When you look at how other municipalities across the country, they budget, to be honest, they don't even talk often about the tax rate. It's just for us, it was always the tax rate because we would have no growth. They always talk about, I read an article this morning, this community, in their long-term projections, they had 7% of property tax. That's what they had. And they were going to need 8%. They don't talk about the property tax or so on. For them, it's always about determining the amount of revenues needed to be able to deliver. And in the year where assessment would be very low, then it doesn't matter for them. They go with the 5% and they adjust, right? I looked at a property this morning because, again, you're trying to make it. And that's why every other local, well, not every other, but the majority of them, and I looked at it this morning. So for a home in Vancouver worth 1.1 million, they only paid 3,600 in property taxes, right? Because when the homes kept going up, and they're just working on that overall revenue to be able to operate. So, but no, your comments are, and that is the policy decision as well. It's just, we're kind of in this new world right now that we did not have pre-pandemic. So
no, we didn't have the you're right, we didn't have the growth, and it's just trying to balance that out. And I think maybe this is an opportunity to sort of look at it in that light and see where we can go. But again, it's about communication. It's about telling the general public what it is that we're doing with the dollars. And we know, for example, for protective services, it's going to cost us more money. I mean, we know that. We know that number of officers we need and supports that we need are higher. And so, and it's going to be well over several $1 million. And so we have that opportunity. And assessments will not always necessarily be this great. How long can they continue to roll? Maybe they will for 10, 15 years, but who knows, right? So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a recommendation. Councillor Butler jumped in there so quickly.
I'm sorry?
Do you wish to move the recommendation?
Are you looking at me, right?
Yeah, sure. No,
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
And Councillor Leger, I had you up.
Yeah, and so you just take that upon advisement and then you come back. Yeah.
Great. So it's been moved and seconded. Councillor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire. Merci énormément, Jacques.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Jacques, for your very exciting presentation. I think you went above and beyond this year. I'd like to ask a few questions. You mentioned there would be an alignment between, in the budget, we are not done with our priority setting exercise yet, and that a few adjustments will need to be done. But as Councillor Leger just mentioned, there will be a considerable increase in our expenditure budget for public safety. Either because we need more RCMP officers, we haven't received a formal answer for that, or for community police services. Are you going to present us with various scenarios, or are you going to wait till you have more certainty about that? How are you seeing the next few weeks and the next few months?
There's no
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
no problem. I didn't know.
I don't need translation.
Yeah, I do.
I will repeat it in both, that's okay. Oui, donc nous, on a l'intention encore.
So we are intending during the preparation exercise to work on various elements. For sure, we are going to present some scenarios, but we're not going to present you with 4 different budget proposals but for sure, different scenarios may have different impacts.
Would we be presenting scenarios? And really for us, we will present one budget recommendation as a whole as administration, but we always have the impacts of things that are funded or not funded as something that we can do. So for example, if CRPA would propose 10 officers and administration would say we're going to move forward with 5, well, we would show the impact of that 10 if we would not recommend it or so on. But the other thing too, it's not in black and white like that. There's consultations, you know what I mean? That has to be presented to council as well, that CRPA budget and things like that. So no, we try to make it work. It is council's budget. We are just there to try and enable it and to try and facilitate the conversation and provide the best information we can to make that decision.
No question about that. My question is, it's very difficult to vote on this motion, not knowing, because I just mentioned 2 examples, there's probably other where there is a significant increase coming, or at least a significant increase in the requests coming. So we anticipate the CRPA will say we need, like you said, 10, could be 15. That's significant year-over-year increase, right? Anyway, so it's tough to vote on this particular when we don't have, but then again, the real decision will be once we adopt the budget. So, but I hope you know that it's difficult for us to give you a specific, don't come back to council and say, well, you said this. Right, but it's based on assumptions and a whole bunch of assumptions that aren't specified yet. So yeah, great, good luck, try to do that. Second question, everybody that I know of, economists, are predicting a reduction in the Bank of Canada interest rates over the next year or so. Let's say 0.5. It might be 0.75. That depends on the economist, but how will that impact the $3 million that you said we would have to invest more in infrastructure? Well, if we have a significant decrease in the interest rates, should that not be able to compensate some of the 3 million? So we would have to just increase, let's say, 2.5 million, 2.25 million instead of 3 million. Did you make that calculation?
No, so what we're proposing today is to increase the capital budget by $3 million. Mm-hmm. That is the gross capital budget. Mm-hmm. We would then, again, invest that capital budget next year, right? We would invest that and have to start paying the majority of that this year. To be honest, last year, we increased capital from operating and the debt. This year, just based on affordability, the affordability of our ratepayers or so on, we would say the majority of that we would need to bond, because we won't be able, based on the other priorities, if we have to, public safety, recreational, so on, we won't be able to take a lot of, if we go with a 5.5%, and we were talking about that $5 million left over to do these initiatives, we would bond it. If we would bond it at that 3 million, we're going to start paying it off next year. right? So that means next year it's gonna be 400,000 more. If we increase the budget 3 million, not increase, stay at the other 3 million, year two is gonna go to 800,000. In year 5 or 10, depending on if we bond over 5 or 10 years, and those are strategies that we look at, it will cost you more when you bond, but sometimes you also need to bond to be able to do good things in your community. Our debt service ratio that we showed a while ago is in good position. We are in that overall realm. But no, I believe right now the 3 million we would be asking for is to invest to increase our capital budget by 3 million.
Right, but we would be probably saving some money if instead of borrowing at 7%, we could borrow at 6.5%. So I guess we can't make that decision specifically now for the budget, but during the year, we will be saving money and then putting that money aside. Is that how it works?
If you look at that component in isolation in year 2, year 3, year 4, if the percent is less than what we're projecting for the long term,
Yeah.
yes, we would
Yeah.
be safe, right? You
Okay.
hope it doesn't get eaten up with inflation, but yes, that is a.
So for now, we can't gamble that the interest rate is going to reduce. We have to borrow $3 million more and hoping to save money along the way. Okay.
Now, all the economists are saying, though, that the interest rates will reduce.
Mhm.
If you look at the article that I attached in the appendix,
Yeah.
that shows, you know what I mean? There's not going to be they're going to need to have to reduce the interest rates. If not, we will be facing some severe economic challenges.
Yeah, although we don't know the exact rate. Okay, 2 more questions. In your graphics, if I understand correctly, you're proposing as mitigation significant reductions in the tax rate over the next 10 years. Is that?
But only assuming we get the assessment.
Well,
If we don't get
exactly.
the
Yeah,
assessment,
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So it's a bunch of assumptions, so,
Yeah.
okay, we have to go with that. And my final question, and this is, it's more, I guess, you've dealt with it very astutely, the impact on the lower income Monctonians, and I appreciate that. I just regret that in the considerations, les enjeux, there is still no banner. You know, there's legal, there's policy, there's financial, there's still nothing on social inclusion. I think that if this isn't one of those that would require consideration of social inclusion in terms of poverty, nothing else will. So it would have been nice to have, or maybe by the time the budget comes along, to have some sort of, you started it, great analysis, so maybe fine tune it to see your median income perfect. That was great. It shows an increasing gap in the capacity to pay. People will have to sacrifice something else, even if we get, you know, more police officers and whatever service enhancements we're going to provide. It still is disproportionate impact because property taxes are not elastic. They have a bigger impact on the poorer people than on the richer people. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing no one, I'd like to thank you very much to you and your team, Jacques. Like this is real, you know, data informed, and really appreciate that. You know, you've outlined, as Councillor Bourgeois just said, you know, implicitly, you know, what the impact is for people that are more challenged financially in our community. So this is very helpful to us as we're thinking going forward, you know, what sorts of things we need to be taking into consideration. So really appreciate that. Appreciate the discussion at this time. On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
The next item, active transportation update, and Leslie Say, active transportation coordinator, and Renee Legacy are here to give a presentation.
So there's 2 cycles to be going the pretzel.
Just say next one.
It's at 8%.
It's not good. I didn't see that. Hello, welcome. I think the floor is yours. Go right up.
Should we wait for Councillor LeBlanc to come back or?
No, we'll get going.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leslie Say, your Active Transportation Coordinator. It's my first time presenting officially before you since I started in my role last September. And I'm here to give you an update on the Active Transportation Plan that you adopted in 2022 and the work that we've been doing since I joined the team last September. Next slide, please. So this is my agenda today. I'll just give you a brief overview of the recommendations that came out of the plan because it is quite a big document. The projects that have done since the plan was adopted and the ones that we have coming up in the next year or so. We'll talk about the trails development that link into the active transportation network, operations and maintenance, of course, and other aspects of the plan, which includes the networking that I've been doing with other communities and other groups, education and awareness programs that are being developed, and also participation in different activities and events. Next slide, please. So just to give a little bit of a review, so the recommendations that come out of the phase 2 of the active transportation plan have two different types. The first ones are, we're talking about physical infrastructure to be built on the ground, which include different types of cycling facilities, most of the parts, so separated cycling facilities, visually separated with just paint, and also multi-use trails that will be completely off the roadway. Also from there as well, we were looking at different network gaps that were identified by the engagement process to see where residents felt there was really an issue, either crossing or a security, something that made them uncomfortable and feel unsafe. It's a variety of different things. The second aspect of it are also sidewalk improvements to help maintain the quality of sidewalks that are already developed, but also the same thing, make connections where sidewalks and crossings may not exist right now. And so there's that. So next slide, please. The second aspect of the recommendations from the active transportation plan are more people-oriented, I guess you could say, in some way. It comes with programming, communications, and getting out there and being at events and becoming present, developing more of a profile. So on the programming side, education and awareness is a huge aspect of that. We have come from a more car-centric, car-focused mindset and orientation here. So there's a lot of new learning and new ways of thinking for a wide range of the residents. But as we see more and more cyclists and pedestrians out on the streets, we do have to do a lot more of that. So there's the aspect of cycling education and pedestrian education, but also driver's education to help them gain awareness, refresh the road safety rules as well. Along with that comes communications. Our team trying to develop messaging that puts a message that is respect for everyone on the roads, users, all people who are out in the community. And that's what we're really trying to foster right now. It's not a pointing fingers at any particular group, but really is understanding that safety is for everyone and that we have to work together to achieve this in our community. So we have a calendar of posts and topics that we've developed that we're trying to work on throughout the year, relevant to the seasons and the different activities going on from construction, back to school, trails and whatnot. So we try and promote that. We also try and promote it tied into events that the city is also organizing. The final thing is events. And here we have from the recommendations, the specific event was to have an open streets event. And that's basically closing down some streets in our, possibly in our downtown area, and having some sort of festival or street festival, car-free event, basically is the bottom line of that. We're not quite there in terms of planning and readiness for this yet, I think, in Moncton. It's something we would like to work towards, perhaps tying into one of the festivals that we have in the summertime events, possibly making it bigger so that we could try and close down. And again, this idea of education comes into it, and change is hard, but closing down a section of the street to really bring life into that area and celebrate what we have in the downtown area. So that is an event that we're working towards, but in the meantime, we're just trying to get out there and be present, get people thinking about what it is to choose another option to get around other than using a personal vehicle. Next step, please. Next slide. So this is a map. This is the proposed cycling network map that's pulled out of the active transportation plan. And I wanted to show you this just to give you a sense of what the network could look like as based on the recommendations from the plan. So basically the brown lines here are the separated bike facilities. So that means either with the delineators and the curb that we have on Killam Drive and Von Harvey right now, or that could mean, if we wish, something completely rebuilt, like a raised cycle path that is attached to the sidewalk or something like that, with catch basins moved to narrow the roadways, things like that. There are many different options and many types. Some of them are more bigger term infrastructure projects. Some of them can be rolled out more quickly with temporary and tactical devices. So I just wanted, this is sort of very big picture look at it. And if you have any questions after, we're happy to answer sort of the different ideas. Next slide, please. And this is the same map, but in French. Next slide, please. This is the proposed cycling prioritization map. So from there, we have short term, which is within the next 5 years, roughly, is the pink areas. Medium term would be the light purple that you see, and long term and other colors sort of are longer term or beyond the plan, or even they're development based. And so this helps us sort of see what the priorities are that were developed by the consultant based on the feedback that they also received from the engagement process through the Let's Chat platform to develop the plan. So we heard a lot about our major streets, St. George, Mountain Road, some parts of Maine even, but we have a lot of people want to be on those streets, and these are people using different modes of transportation. So right now, a lot of these streets are more favorable to just vehicular traffic. So the question is, how can we also help make these streets comfortable for pedestrians and people biking as well, or people also, and by pedestrians we mean, and cyclists we mean people using all kinds of mobility aids as well, from wheelchairs and walkers to even, for example, recumbent bicycles or skateboards, scooters, electric devices now more than ever. So this is also, again, to give you a sense from a very high level to see what the priorities that came out of the plan were. Next slide, please. And this is the same map, but also in French as well. And the next slide. So right now, I'm just going to jump in right to almost like a report card for me. What have I done in my past year, or what has happened since 2023? So right before I joined the city, the Department of Engineering installed physically separated bike lanes on Von Harvey Boulevard. Here we can see what the bottom section has the removable curb there, and also on Killam Drive there are delineators. And also we added some visually separated bike lanes. Specifically, this is a photo of Dixon Boulevard in the West End. Let me check what else we have in case I forgot anything. I think those are the main ones. So we've heard a lot of great feedback from the community, especially from the cycling community, about the separated bike lanes. They feel the level of protection, they feel the level of separation on there. At the same time, we've also heard feedback from drivers in terms of feeling that there's nowhere to pull over from if an emergency vehicle comes by, or they feel, some of them also say that we don't need to put these in here because they don't see anyone using them either. We've also been in discussions with the fire department to see how we can work with them, because also they find the separated bike lanes here a bit challenging. If they do need to pass vehicles, then how do they fit? So we're working with them to see whether we can adjust spacing and what we can do to help meet their needs as well. Next slide, please. So this year, we've been working a lot on different multi-use trail connections. We have built a section of Grand Trunk Street that connects Millennium Boulevard and Russ Howard Drive into Centennial Park. And that, I believe, is complete. And even this morning, I just got an email from someone, a resident, saying that they find that that's a really useful connection and a great one that just helps them go from one multi-use path to another. Also, we have a section of Milner Avenue from Brookside Drive down to Main Street, and also connecting into the Riker Trail of the Riverfront Trail that's being built, or it might already be done. And it's these are little connections that are to help just can make those bridge those gaps. And finally, we have one that will be started on Horseman Drive. Sidewalk had to be removed due to adding a left turn lane for a development that will be being built there. So we are moving it to a multi-use path on the west side, and that will connect to the roundabout and to Berry Mills, with the intention in the future, as the industrial park builds out, that we will be able to continue those lanes into the bike park, into the industrial park as well. As you know, we've started a traffic calming program, which is not specifically under the AT umbrella, but it relates incredibly closely to that, because the objective of the traffic calming program is to reduce speeds in the city, and also improve the comfort and safety for people on bikes and walking as well. So the two go hand in hand. When we look at traffic calming, we also look at pedestrian and cycling movements as well. It's a new project, so we're learning a lot. We have some pilot installations on Purdy Avenue, Pleasant Street, and also Lonsdale Drive and Twin Oaks as well, which will have different treatments on it. I'll just show you a picture of them just afterwards. We have built some off-street bike lanes at the end of St. George Boulevard by Wheeler Boulevard, and that is to replace the ones that were on street that had to be again adjusted to accommodate a left turn lane to the new school, to the Wabanaki School and Bernice McNaughton. So those have been moved to off-street multi-use path as well by Wheeler Boulevard, and they will join with the rest of St. George. We've also, at the intersection of Connaught and Wheeler Boulevard, there were modifications made to the eastbound off-ramp of Wheeler Boulevard at Connaught, where there was an unfortunate fatality 2 years ago. And so the right turn, the off-ramp at the right turn there has been slowed down. We were not able to, it's not practical to remove the off-ramp and make a complete reconfiguration, but we did the best to change the shape of that off-ramp so that it allows drivers to have a better sight view when they want to turn right, and also when they want to make a turn for crossing for pedestrians. At the same time, just recently, we're adding green paint to the crosswalk to make it more visible, going across the three parts of the crosswalk, so across the ramp and across Connaught Street, and also across the westbound ramp. Sorry, it's hard. I don't have a visual for that, but it's sort of all the places that you can cross as a pedestrian or cyclist. They will have green zebra paint on there, just to raise awareness and to give that visual cue to everyone crossing that intersection that it is a very busy and very constrained space that everyone must exist in for the student. Finally, for that intersection, we are adding it's called a protected left turn. So the vehicles that will be turning, coming off of Morton Avenue and making a left turn to the eastbound on-ramp to Wheeler will have their own dedicated left turn light, so they will have the green light to turn, and it will turn red when the rest of the through traffic can go through, so that they will not be allowed to turn as the pedestrian light is on at that point. And the unfortunate almost fatality, thank goodness it was not, but the collision that happened not too long ago, that will prevent that from happening again because the truck or the vehicles will not be able to make that left turn while there's a pedestrian in that passing. So once the equipment and scheduling arrive, that hopefully that will be installed in the near future. And finally, throughout the city, working on extending sidewalks and also repairing sidewalks where we need. And that sidewalk renewal is a important program because it's something that it's important for accessibility for all types of users to make sure that they can travel around. Wheelchair users in particular and others moving with mobility aids do find the condition of the sidewalks can be quite challenging, especially in the inner city or the inner Wheeler Loop, because it's just our environment, so many challenges to keep those in good shape. So it's a program that always trying to keep on top of. Next slide, please. So this is just to talk about St. George Boulevard. We've done a number of improvements on the boulevard, starting at Wheeler Boulevard all the way to 6th Avenue. So in preparation for the new school, the Wabanaki School in Bernice McNaughton, that will be opening next week. So this is where the off-street cycle paths were replaced to replace the ones that were on street due to the left turn lane into the new school facilities. We've also installed a new pedestrian signal at Bessborough and St. George Boulevard there to help the students cross St. George Boulevard here. These 4 circles here are also pedestrian crossings. So that's the new lights that would be going there, Bessborough, Dixon Boulevard, and this is right in front of Hillcrest Boulevard. What we're doing, we're also putting in a center line pedestrian delineator or bollard with the pedestrian symbol. It's reflective in yellow and highly visible, just to indicate to vehicles that those are pedestrian crossings. At the same time, at the bike lane edges, just to again squeeze and slow down the traffic a little bit, we have 2 of the green bollards just to indicate again that these are crossing areas and to help drivers pay attention and realize these are very busy intersections. Finally here, this section of St. George here was recently resurfaced, and we are changing the lane markings there. Our traffic engineer was able to do the left turn analysis at the intersection of 6th Avenue, Wellington, and St. George Boulevard there, and we're removing the left turn lanes in order to, again, narrow down the travel lanes for vehicles and increase the buffer between the bike lanes as well. So that is a improvement that we can do just with the street repainting program that is happening after the resurfacing. And so that will give a wider buffer for the cycle lane, which will also allow us the space to possibly physically separate the entire corridor as resources and priorities allow us to, but also will help with this slowing, again, this idea of traffic calming, which is a huge thing across the entire city for different regions and corridors, because we've heard a lot about St. George Boulevard also being a straight line and very fast. What can we do about that? So this is there's still plenty of room for everyone. It's just vehicles that will be traveling down there will notice that there's less space allotted for them, and we're trying to give more space allotted to the other users. Next slide, please. So these are some of the other traffic calming treatments that are being installed or have already been installed in the city. So this is a raised crosswalk. For instance, they're being built on, or have they been built already? Okay, the ones on Twin Oaks. We've installed 4 raised crosswalks on Twin Oaks to help with traffic calming.
Under construction.
Under construction.
Yes.
Yes, Pleasant Street we've crossed Pleasant Street where it connects nearest Shediac Road. There's a raised crosswalk installed there. A raised intersection has been installed along 30 Avenue at Lorne, the 4-way stop there. So as drivers arrive, they must really slow down. Well, they have to stop because it's a four-way stop, but then they will approach the ramp slowly to go across. So again, we will see these are all under evaluation as people get used to them, as the traffic, we will study these to see how effective they are. If they really do a job to help people slow down, or do we need to adjust or try new tactics? Same thing here, we have, again, at key crosswalks and locations, we have the same centerline delineator to indicate that there's pedestrian crossing, as well as the side delineators just to help squeeze traffic. So those are installed on Purdy and also on Pleasant for now. And once Twin Oaks is ready, then we intend to put those in. Yes, Councilor.
The four-way stop, the raised intersection, where's that, sorry?
Lorne and Purdy Avenue.
Lorne and Purdy.
Yeah. So that was previously the four-way, just a regular four-way stop there, but now it's a four-way stop plus raised intersection. Next slide, please. So now we're working on planning for 2025 and the future. And this year, for me, obviously, it's been a humongous learning curve. It's practically vertical, the things that I've learned since I've started. And we heard a lot from many residents about, on top of what the active transportation plan shows us, but what our changing needs and priorities are now as everything changes within Moncton so quickly with the population and the demographics and everything. So what we're really hearing, and again, we know that there's a lot of work to do in terms of making things safer for all users. There are lots of priorities, but we have to really be strategic how we concentrate our resources and our time. Otherwise, we will just be running all over the place trying to address everything at once, and that's not effective. So what we've heard really is the McLaughlin, Morton, and Connaught corridor there is a real issue. There are huge pressures from there's new schools that have been built in that area and lots of schools in that area. The university is there. Just a real big generator of traffic of all kinds. People coming in, people coming out of that area as well. So that is the area that we would like to focus on in 2025 is McLaughlin Avenue, McLaughlin Drive, and moving on to Morton Avenue and Connaught Street as well to see how can we improve and fit active transportation onto those areas, but how can we improve just safety in general for everyone, because it's really something that many people have told us is a real priority in the city. So we're going to be working on that with talking with the Active Transportation Coalition of Moncton as well, getting their feedback to see what can be done. As well, we're considering some road diets on other streets. So West Main from Von Harvey towards the Wheeler Boulevard roundabout, that is also going to be on the table for consideration to see whether we can narrow the road width, the street widths, or can we actually remove a lane and make it a 3-lane? If it will we still be able to, our intention is not to bring everything to a standstill, but it's more, can it still function to a certain level with a diet, as we call it, or like reducing the amount of space given to cars, basically. So we have a number of those also on the list. We're also considering what are the opportunities with our different reconstructions that are happening. And our AT plan is also sort of based on those plans, trying to tie in, for instance, the St. George project is a perfect example of that. We know that there's going to be a major construction coming in the next few years. So how can we also at the same time prepare to make the facilities better for all users as well? So we're working on trying to tie those in, and also it's a very cost-effective way to do things as much as possible. For instance, the St. George Boulevard line paintings from 6th Avenue to Mount Royal, we did that with the resurfacing that happened there. It's no added cost to paint those lines differently, which is an excellent savings as well. So we'll be looking at those. Some other items, so intersection improvements. That's a challenge, and it can be a big project, but we're looking at tools to see how can we make some of our key intersections, our very busy intersections, safer for people crossing it. Again, that's another comment that we hear a lot from residents, is that just crossing the street is really difficult these days. Drivers are no longer, or are not respectful. They do not necessarily obey the pedestrian signals, and it is something that we can look at, and there are tools in our toolbox that we can use to try and make some changes that will make them safer for people crossing. That's also like a very important and very loud priority that we hear from residents. Finally, the last one I write because that's a bit ethereal, long-range strategic plan. Our priorities change all the time. What we hear from residents, it comes with our construction schedules and different things. So, but that's trying to look at sort of perhaps some of the bigger projects that we would like to see to help connect the network, such as and I'm throwing this out there, but such as a pedestrian bridge across Wheeler Boulevard to connect the north end to the Plaza Drive area. So that's a big dream, and we know that it's an expensive dream, but it makes sense to start planning for those now and seeing what can we put in place so that when our opportunities line up, we can be ready to act on it. So different items like that, we would like to start itemizing and listing those so that we know when we can really start having all our pieces in place so that we can act on it and get it ready when the opportunity arises. Next slide, please. The other aspect of my job is also to work with our trails coordinator to talk about trails and recreation for active transportation as well. So as we know, our main trail that we've been working on is the Panacity Trail. And there's a map coming up after this, but that will be the great connector of the different parks in the area. And that will provide opportunities for residents to either have off-street, some of it more recreational cycling experience or walking experience, but also really important to link the different areas of our city, from downtown to the north end to the east, everything. So there are sections of that being built now or being designed. Some of it's a bit of a challenge from what I heard from our trails coordinator. The easy parts have been built already, so now we're working on the challenging pieces that are left. At the same time, we will be also starting to look at a connector from Ryan Road to Mapleton Park. And I'll show you a map of that in just a second as well. But again, that's a great recreation trail, but that will also be an excellent active transportation trail to help people choose another way to get to the shops on Mountain Road or shops at Mapleton from their North End neighborhoods. And finally, we also have on the list, sort of again, opportunity driven, opportunity arises, is paving some of our linear trails to make it more accessible for all users, and also possibly helping with the maintenance of them as well. So we're costing and looking at paving the Northwest Trail or sections of it for now, the Westmount Trail, which goes along the south part of Jones Lake, and the part of the Riverfront Trail that goes across the old dump site, Moncton dump site. That part, it's the elevation and the erosion that happens right now with the rain events and whatnot. It's a challenging trail and not very usable by people with accessibility restrictions and things like that. So those are on our wish list as well, let's say. Next slide, please. So this is just a small section of the Panacity Trail, and a section that we're working on. Just want to orientate myself. So please ignore the phasing years on that. This is an out-of-date map. Please ignore those sections, but the route is quite up to date. So currently, Louisville Road. So this is the small connector section that we're working on right now, which is from Louisville Road to Donald Avenue that follows Halls Creek under the CN Bridge and comes out sort of past the old Coliseum on Donald Avenue where it meets Clement Cormier. And according to, again, our Trails Coordinator, that is the most challenging section to design just due to the environmental constraints and also the different property owners around there and having, for example, having to work with CN to go under the bridge and different items. So that, we hope construction will start on that next year. That is our hope. This section here from the Riverfront Trail to connect, well, this part of this section is already built. That's the Panacity Trail behind the Superstore that connects to the East End Pool. So that's a really great section that's already been built, and we're adding the multi-use trail that brings us to Botsford, the intersection of Botsford and Wheeler this year. The section that brings us down to the riverfront will be looked at in the coming years as well. Also, as we work with the University of Moncton to bring it across their campus in one way or another, and again across your vision lines, bring it to Mapleton. That is the overall vision for that. Next slide, please. And this is another one to connect it. It would connect here. This is the one from Ryan Road to Mapleton Park. So Ryan Road down here at the bottom, and we would like to extend the trail across sort of the parallel to the neighborhoods in this area to Mountain Road, and then it would basically parallel behind the Trinity Power Center and jog its way down Frampton Lane into Mapleton Park. And that would, if you go back one slide, from this point here, it would go back to connect to the Panacity Trail. So that in itself would open up the opportunities for recreation and for just getting around in general for people not using their vehicles. Next slide, please. So some of the other challenges that we're trying to work through with public works and engineering and everything, it's really the question of maintenance. Again, hearing from residents, we know that more and more people will be using our sidewalks in the winter more than ever to get to bus routes, to get to their places of work or to schools and whatnot. It's just the reality. Not everyone can fit in a car. Not everyone has a car to fit into. So the question of the condition of our sidewalks, especially for the winter maintenance, is a challenge. And learning from our public works teams and our operations teams that just the unevenness is very difficult for the machinery that they have. It can be dangerous for the operators. They feel every single bump on those, and also, and again, for the people walking on these sidewalks or having to use them just to make sure that they're clear and safe for everyone to use. So that's something I know Alexandre has recently presented his sidewalk snow removal plan to you, which I talked with him about. So we're working towards trying to solve that challenge. The other aspect also are the year-round maintenance of our bike lanes. Currently, the separated ones are removed for the winter season, and then we reinstall them in the spring. That adds a lot of time to the public works teams to have to do that. And also, once they are installed, it's difficult to maintain their cleanliness just because at the present we don't have the machinery that can go between the separated curb and the separated delineators and the curb in order to do it. So it's a challenge. It's great. Cyclists appreciate them. At the same time, at one point during the year, they become, if there's construction and big machinery, it just the dust and the dirt that builds up on them then becomes another safety hazard for people using them on their bikes and things. So again, this is a challenge that we're working to solve. Requires machinery and resources in order to operate it so that we can keep them clean for the year. But again, it's something It's something, if we want Moncton to be a city where people can move around and make the choice to use their bicycles or foot to get around safely to where they need to go, then this is the way we need to move towards it. And it's really important for many, many reasons, which I know you all know, from environmental, social, health, everything. It's a big priority, big important thing. Next slide, please. So these are just some fun photos that I took and decided to share, just to show sometimes and it's not, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but it's just to show what it is sometimes in the wintertime and other times of the year, what we have. For example, this sidewalk was cleared, but then the snowplow from the apartment building here decided to push all the snow onto it. So I'm not saying, it's not like, oh, well, Public Works should go redo it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying these are some of the challenges that we do experience. Here, again, this part has been rectified this summer because this is the bike lane on St. George, and it's just been beautifully newly resurfaced, so it's no longer all potholed. But at the same time, we do have other places that the road condition is difficult. So even though we have a painted bike lane for cyclists, imagine riding down that, or if you do happen to hit one of those holes on your bike, then it can be quite dangerous. And here, that's finally just me decided. I snowshoed into work one day on one of our few snowstorms last year, and we were joking about keeping that a snowshoe trail for the winter. I don't think that would fly very well. So next slide, please. So those are parts of my job where we're trying to work on physical solutions and build in-the-ground infrastructure and maintain that infrastructure for our residents. The other part of my job, again, is more people-oriented and working with the public. So this past year, I've been doing a lot of networking and trying to make connections with different communities, different organizations, and whatnot. So we do have an active transportation working group. We meet every 6 weeks. We have community representatives from the Transportation Coalition that are there to talk with us, as well as staff from different departments. So we can talk about operational challenges, trying to align ourselves so we can all work together, push the messaging together, and work together instead of just being counterproductive and against each other. So it's been a learning experience as well, and we've learned a lot, we've grown a lot, we've made some changes, and we're trying to make sure that our communication and our alignment is all in the right direction, which I feel positive that it is. Also representing accessibility and active transportation with the accessibility committee here. And the different groups that I've been working with in Moncton or in the region are the Active Transportation Coalition, La Bikerie, the Downtown Moncton Business Association, Ability New Brunswick, the Climate Action Group at University of Moncton as well. Almost done, and some others. So we have a Tri-City Active Transportation Group, which we meet also to make the connections with Riverview Idea to see how we can also bring it together. And other items we're meeting with communities in different provinces, and also at the national level at the Transportation Association of Canada. Next slide, please. Finally, on our education and awareness, we've been trying to post regularly using our social media networks. We're developing an online, more interactive, useful active transportation map that we hope to roll out this winter. We're trying to make website improvements, again, trying to align with our partners in other communities. I will be touching base with the school districts to try and develop an active and safe routes to school program or get people talking about that. And we're also working on developing a road safety campaign, which we hoped will be we'll be able to start rolling out in the coming winter. And next slide. Finally, I just last slide. I was present at we did three activities this year. I was at the Legs for Literacy Expo, which is basically I had a booth there, and it was a really useful activity just to make connections with the local active community, specifically runners who are there to pick up the race kits, but talked a lot about Moncton in particular and its trails, it's the situation here. We organized a commuter challenge for the city employees and the public. And we hope to do that again. And finally, we were present at the Navarro Fest. We had a bike rodeo as well. And we hope that we will continue these activities and develop more for the community. And finally, that is the end of my presentation. I know Renee has, sorry, I just want to leave that, sorry, next slide, my bad. Next slide, please. Just, I want to show this. This is called the Sustainable Transportation Hierarchy, or we can call it the pedestrian hierarchy as well. It's a new way of thinking just to flip our mindset now, which is what we're trying to work towards. Trying to make space for our most vulnerable users on the road and thinking who has the right to be there and how can we help them have a presence. Private vehicles have had a long history, but now let's switch it.
Perfect.
Renee has a comment.
Do I have time for closing remarks?
Very quickly.
Okay.
Very
This
quickly.
is a fairly new program for us. This is just our second year doing some improvements, and it's only been 6 months. I thought you were here for 6 years. Feels like that. Definitely some lessons learned along the way. First lesson learned, we have a lot of design challenges. One being we need more land sometimes to put that infrastructure in place, and land comes as a cost and impact a lot of businesses or property owners. Secondly, enemy number one for bike lanes, probably ND power poles. Sorry to say that, customer shock. But they are difficult to feel targeted. They're usually outside of the street, they're in the way. So this is a big challenge. And second lesson learned, we will not please everyone. We all know that. We have a long history of engineering not pleasing everyone. But traffic calming and ATS brought it to another level. Whether we're taking away parking on Dixon, boy, have we heard from that community when we did that. We've recently taken a left turn pocket on St. George and Harlington, so we're hearing about that as well. Hearing a lot of negative feedback on our traffic calming. So just a little note there that we're hearing it from both sides. We are caught in the middle, and we just want to make sure we have your support as we move along the way with these
Perfect.
structure.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Leslie. First up, I have Councillor Terrio, then I have Councillor Butler. Go ahead, Councillor Terrio.
Merci beaucoup, Leslie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Leslie. I think it's a very positive message and an excellent presentation.
You mentioned the working committee. This is kind of an organically organized committee, right? It's not a committee of the city. Would it be helpful to you if we were to look at this as a council and maybe have some sort of a permanent committee in place?
I find the way that we're working now, because it's a very operational based committee, so we can really dig into the fine details of a problem and talk about it from, we have the user perspective, we have the engineering expertise and everything to go in it. So we find that there are a few kinks to work out along the way, but we find that it is very effective and very useful so that we can really help identify what specific problems are. So I feel like we still need time to keep on working in this way to see how we need, again, like with the active transportation plan, we need a few cycles in order to see how well it's going to work. So I feel like we're on the right path. For me, it was a learning experience how to manage and be effective as well. So I feel like we're still heading in the right direction.
Essentially, the status quo is fine. You don't need a permanent committee at this time.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
If you feel otherwise, my experience, I feel like, it is.
It might be a good thing because then you could come to council and ask for more money. You should do what you want to do. Anyway, you mentioned physically separate bike lanes. I've seen some beautiful ones painted green. Why do we not paint them all green? Because it shows, you can see, you can,
green paint is used to highlight the transitions. It's not the whole, also it would be incredibly time consuming and costly to paint an entire kilometers and kilometers of a stretch green or another color. But the green is to highlight the transitions and sort of points where they cross, either they cross a street So there's the potential for conflict with the cars coming out, for instance, or if they're heading to an intersection, for example, Von Harvey at Main, the bike lane goes straight, but there's a slip lane, a right turn lane. So it's to show that bikes can go straight and keep aware driver that bikes will, but also there's also that turn. So they're more used strategically, and I think they are effective, and I think people appreciate them. So perhaps as we put more bike lane, and they're bike specific as well. So they're not meant, putting the green is not meant necessarily for pedestrian crossings and things, but so as we put more bike facilities out, then likely that there will be more of these crossings that will be painted to highlight those.
You mentioned open street. We haven't had that.
No,
So
not yet.
why does it take so long? We close Main Street for cars.
Yeah,
To be able to close a street for bicycle.
Yeah, potentially, but let's keep in mind, Leslie's been with us less than a year, so this would take a lot of planning and from a programming point of view. So it's just one of the many things that we will be looking at
For next summer.
for next summer.
Merci. Just one last question. Panacadie Trail. So you mentioned the Coliseum, and I'm assuming you're all working on that. So to make sure we don't lose everything from the Coliseum heritage perspective, if the trail goes by that area.
The trail doesn't affect that. It doesn't affect that area at all, like that site at all. It just passes by it.
Okay. But I guess from a design perspective, we don't want to lose the history of the Coliseum. So if there's a trail that goes by there, maybe take advantage of that and explain the story of the Coliseum.
I guess that would be a conversation to have with the property owner at the point, but yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's true. It's not owned by the city yet.
No.
So we need to move on that.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you so much for the presentation. A lot of work ahead of you. Just a couple things with me is the street calming. I know in my ward in Purdy and also on Lonsdale, I've heard nothing but great things. The only question I get asked all the time, how are they going to do the plowing? So do you have an answer for that?
Well, other municipalities have them in Halifax, for instance, and so we've kept our public works crew involved from day one. We already have one on Plaza, which not the speed question, but the actual race crosswalk. So I haven't heard any really negative feedback on that one. It's just a matter of making sure the operators know where they are so they don't hit them at
That'd be a good
full
idea.
plowing speed. Now, there might be a challenge with the speed cushions, the one that have the brake.
Yeah, well, that's the ones that are on
And
Lonsdale.
those ones can have some accumulation of snow and ice in between, like we've heard.
We'll keep them slow still.
Yeah.
The second one is, my last question is that we do a lot of painting with crosswalks in the summertime. But the one thing that I noticed, and I was coming across in a very pulse writing, but I was coming across Frampton Lane the other day, and they painted them. But when you come up over the hill from Mapleton, there's no markings that you're coming to a crosswalk. Remember, we used to have them diamonds painted in? I think that, for safety reasons for crosswalks, sometimes as drivers, we don't know there's a crosswalk there until we get right up. So I think when we say that, because I had sent in an email to the Board of Works in regards to it, and they come back and they said they closed it, the file was closed. But then I went back, I seen that they didn't put any diamonds there. So the diamond should be part of the crosswalk.
Yeah, generally they are.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Alexandre has anything to add on that. Maybe it's during a different operation that they paint the diamonds after the fact. I don't know, Alexandre, do you have any comments?
If you can, if you want to send me something on this, I'll look at it with the team. I believe, Renee, I thought they work with your team for the specific signals, but if you tell me exactly like where you're looking at, and I can come back to you next week after we can talk to the team.
Yeah, I'll take some photos there and send them up to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Legier.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess I've had a lot of questions about the split bumps. And so I guess we'll see how that goes. But I also did get a bit of confusion on the line that was painted on Purdy. And the reason is because initially people thought it was going to be a bike lane, but it's not, it's parking. So maybe in the future, I notice now that you've put the delineators, but they're green. But there'd be a different color that indicates then that green to me is, it's a bike lane. Maybe red or another color. It was good you put it, but so that was my, and yes, and it, sometimes it's the communication piece, because I don't think a lot of people in the old West End who use St. George Boulevard and people in New West End who turn on going towards Millennium were under the understanding that that lane would go missing. So I don't know what the queuing is like. I do know that you indicated that you would you'd monitor it. My only other comment, I guess, would be that it's unfortunate because I don't feel that even doing what you've done, which is great, you've given the bikes more space, will slow traffic down. And I for the last week now, you painted the lines really nice, but it's as much of a racetrack as it was before. And I think I'm hoping next year that we could have some opportunities to really be serious, and maybe we need to take an opportunity to look at it as like Salisbury Road, where we put in a specific third lane in the middle, right? And you choke it down, yeah. So, but I'm hoping that happens next year, because right now, and I'm a bit fearful now that the school will open with the speeds that I'm seeing, and you've indicated that the speeds in that area are excessively high compared to what you normally see. And, you know, the recommendation is extra patrols. Well, I know that there are no extra patrols and the resources aren't there. And so I think we need to really look at this in a different way. And maybe that's where, you know, I threw that idea out in terms of 1 cent, you know, going towards specific items, and maybe, you know, maybe that 1 cent, $1 million goes towards your budget to do the things that we keep hearing that, you know, are becoming greater and greater safety issues. So anyway, but I think for communication wise, yes, people are quite anxious about that turn lane. So I don't know, you know, when you will come back, just and let us know that, you know, things are happening in a temporary setting. Okay. Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, sure.
You.
Good.
Sorry, Councillor Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire. Je te trouve smart. J'espère que la prochaine fois que tu...
I hope that next time that you're in a trivia game that I can be on your team. Yeah, we'll be the A team for sure.
Active transportation is, yes, health and all that individual benefit, but it's also public safety. And for me, actually, public safety is number one. This is why we have sidewalks in the first place. This is why we have trails. It is for tourism, Panacadi, it is for all the other stuff, health reasons, but it's to protect the people walking and the people cycling from cars. In a collision, the car's going to win. So we have to protect, like you said earlier, the most vulnerable. And my question is, you know, Vision's land, it's virgin territory, so you're probably very much involved in, if ever there is some sort of development, then we can design from scratch the best trail system and the best sidewalk system, et cetera. In some of the other boulevards, streets, St. George, they're wide enough that they can accommodate multiple users. Ideally, everybody uses the road. That's the principle of it. But in the practice, it's very dangerous. Some bikers just are pitiful bikers. And some drivers of cars are just pitiful. Those are the 5% that we have to watch out for and redesign the whole system because of them. But still, the problem to me is mostly when we will tackle the older, narrower streets. And I was in Malmö, Sweden 2 years ago in a climate change conference, but walking into their downtown, they have what you refer to as raised bike paths. So the building comes there. The first is a sidewalk for pedestrian, and a little bit lower, maybe an inch, is the cyclist, and then it drops down to automobile. Very narrow street, but they could accommodate that. And I can't see why we couldn't accommodate that. It'll take long. It'll take money galore, but I'm convinced that that is the best security, public safety mechanism, sidewalks with,
Yes.
am I wrong?
No, that is definitely the gold standard.
So are we going to have a plan that says, especially for the narrow streets, but there might be somewhere else, you know, this is what is needed, and if we pitch it as a public safety measure, I hope the council will say, okay, let's up the ante. We were talking earlier about the budget. We'd have to increase $3 million a year in budget, but this might be one of these priorities that not just micro-surfacing streets for cars, but keeping people alive and free of injury. So from my perspective, I don't know how the rest of the council, I would hope that you put the priority where that best bang for the buck security for our citizens walking and cycling. How do we get them from point A to point B and point C safely? So I hope that you considered that. Correct me if I'm wrong. If that is the best solution, how is that reflected in the AT plan?
I'm just going to jump in here because I'm going to bet you $1 million that Malmo, Sweden doesn't have one pole that's above ground and all. That's the standard in Europe and even a lot of places in Canada. So that's going to be our challenge number one, is those poles. Let's take Connaught, for instance. There's poles on each side, and one could think, well, let's just bring the poles on one side. Well, guess what? We need those poles on the other side to feed all the houses that are on the other side. Bringing all that infrastructure underground, we could definitely build all kinds of streets like that, but yes, the cost will be something else. And just to note that that cost of bringing all the infrastructure underground, the electrical and communication, is not part of the AT plan cost summary. So if we're going to that standard, that's probably looking at double, triple.
If it's the best bang for the buck and it's long term, instead of putting up little signs and painting every year and.
Free them for the winter and whatnot, yeah.
Yeah, if we look at it 20 years down the road, not 2 or 3 years down the road, we got to start moving.
I think when we're looking at a full street reconstruction like we're doing on Blues downtown, I think that should be at least our first consideration. Can we build with that infrastructure underground?
Yeah, not just minor streets, but the medium size. Yeah, thank you. Okay, merci, madame la maire.
Thank you. Councillor Richard.
Merci, madame la maire. I'm singly out. Félicitations, congratulations on everything you've done so far. That's a lot of footwork. Looking at the proposed cycling network map again, we still have that red dot as a gap at Connaught and what we talked about a while ago. What else is we got some notes on what's going to be happening. What else? Do we have anything else in view?
Long term?
Yeah, because I mean, we've had, after the first accident, we had, the gap was still there.
Mm-hmm.
Now this last accident, that gap's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's erase that.
So this winter, we're actually designing that corridor, seeing how we can fit some AT infrastructure on Connaught, Morton, and McLaughlin. The challenging street between the three will be Connaught. Morton, quite a wide right away. We already have a gravel path on one side, which we could pave. So that's, to me, is a quick win in my books. McLaughlin Drive, we already have some painted bike lanes that we're making wider this year on the section because of our microsurfacing, and we have room for that separation. But Connaught is another story with poles on each side, houses really close to the street, so that's going to be a challenge. Even more of a challenge in Connaught will be the overpass bridge over Willow Boulevard. So we've already had some discussion with DTI. How do we take 4 lanes of traffic, bring it down to 3, and dedicate one of those lanes for cycling facility? That's the only way we can make it happen.
Conversation has started?
Yes, high level, but it has started. It has been done in the province elsewhere. I think St. John did that on one of the DTI bridges.
We're not reinventing the wheel.
We're not. It's just going to be lane reductions again. So, let's be ready for definitely some oppositions on that, because we've seen it every time we take, whether it's on street parking or some lanes, there's going to be an equally strong voice on the other side of the house, but that's what needs to happen there.
Yeah, so, and the reason I asked Leslie about the raised intersection, Lauren and Purdy, is there any thought of putting that at the four-way stop on Fairview Knoll and McLaughlin? Tennessee, sorry.
Fairview Knolls and Henderson.
Yeah.
It's a tool in the toolbox. It's definitely one of the most expensive traffic calming measures because we're putting a lot of asphalt, plus you got to reuse some of the catch basins. But it's one of the tools in the toolbox. But again, we have that traffic calming policy where it rates all the streets. You've seen a lot of those emails go by. And so we're planning for next year's program. We're asking for more budget for 2025. But I can already tell you that we've so far analyzed about 70 to 80 streets and 25 already qualified out of that list. And there's many more analysis pending, and we probably have budget to do 5 or 6 with what we're currently proposing. So I'm not sure where Hennessy fits in that, but it would have to compete with basically all the other streets to be fair to our policy.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's way more traffic there than there was. The multi-purpose trail is very well used.
Good.
Lots of people using that, kids, and it's safer for them to be off the road, right? And just a note on those green posts you were talking about, they're probably too big for your delineators, but they create quite a separation.
Okay.
The power.
The powerful.
Is there anyone who's not spoken yet who wishes to ask a question? If not, I would go back to Councillor Thériault.
Merci, Madame la maire. Je viens d'apprendre quelque chose, René.
Yes.
Quand j'ai voyagé partout en Europe,
I've traveled throughout Europe, but I never realized that everything was underground.
could we undertake with NB Power? I'm sure that they have a profit, they make profits, right? Maybe they could help us in health, because it's about a health issue as well. It's not just about, so maybe we could begin some kind of a discussion and work this through and do not just the new areas, but do the old ones as well, the old sectors.
Yeah, I can tell you from experience of just behind us, Queen Street is a great example where we build everything underground. We're doing on boots, and there's other examples in the city where we're doing it. I can tell you that most of the cost is borne by the city. NB Power will give us a credit if, for instance, the poles we are taking out are old and they recognize that it's going to get replaced in the next few years. They give us a credit on that, but it's just that credit is really, really a small portion of the entire cost. We're talking about all the infrastructure that's going underground is borne by the city, and also we have to pay NB Power, Bells, Rogers of the world to actually put their wires in the ground as well. So we are talking millions of dollars for, not even a kilometers.
But maybe we could have a high-profile discussion with various partners and just, change the whole way that we do things. I think it's worth a try, and we'll give them credit around the world for doing that, okay?
I agree. I think there needs to be some advocacy, lobbying. I'm not sure what it is.
Advocacy.
We're hearing, even Kevin Sillecker, director of Econ Dev, has told us that with all the immigration, he's hearing feedback how ugly our streets are because people not only from Europe, but even other parts of Canada are moving here and they're saying, we've never seen all these wires in the street because everything in Ontario or Quebec or wherever they're from is underground. I think that, no offense to NB Power, I think your NB Powers are, started as a rural.
We're going to appoint him as a spokesperson.
I am open to your help because right now the way the standard is that the city borne the majority of the cost of going underground, and it's challenging and it's very expensive.
Anyone else? I was thinking about that, Councillor Thériault, just yesterday on Mountain Road. It is ugly with all of those power lines along there. First thing, because you mentioned all of the negative feedback, as someone who gets a lot of negative feedback, I wanted to offer up that people on Twin Oak are very happy. Like they were curious about it, but you know, when you say, you know, there are 3 schools along here and this is to slow all of us down, they immediately go, oh yes. So I just wanted to provide that. You mentioned Horseman. Is that going to be paved?
Yes, it's a multi-purpose trail, essentially the extension of the Twin Oaks multi-purpose trail, which is going to be the same side of the street.
Right.
On the west side.
So that should, because of the configuration of the circle too, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
That it would all go through there. That's really great. And just thank you. Thanks for, it gives us hope that there's progress and that the gaps are being identified. So thank you very much. Today was just an update, so we don't need a vote or anything, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's really great. I think that concludes this meeting. So I would take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Richard.
Few minute break.
Yeah.